Today is April 27th, 2024. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganako, Mekoche Chestakom Aki, or Dekot Nagotine Siku. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson, and I use she, her, they, them pronouns. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My people wore rabbit skin, so it's been referred to as the land of the Hare people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is uninvited to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary, or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. Acknowledging proximity to whiteness is important because the darker the skin, the more racism a person experiences. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellow Knives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution. Having a Canadian Indian Act imposed status card is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two Spirit, or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community, and Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socio-economic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians can't even find suitable employment. And I bring that up because if you are a person that has any type of um, experience in the work world, then you'll see you don't see Native people and you don't see them for a reason. And if you look at the stats of your own company, that is why we have imposed poverty because of this racism. I am not a social worker, nor am I an elder, nor do I speak on behalf of all Indigenous people. But I share my journey as a Dene mother navigating this colonial, misogynistic, racist world in 2024. As a trauma informed Dene woman who's attempted to run and join harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions, just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow for incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of health services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have worked to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today, and I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for the so called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation and as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never be 1 month. It is important to understand that the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on these lands by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so called time of reconciliation. Can they be performative? Of course. It's important your land acknowledgements have meaning. I encourage all to introduce themselves with their acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, and how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, a citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement, so we as Indigenous peoples know how safe you are to be around. If you won't pronounce your local Indigenous nations' names, you won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself, because we face the most colonial violence based on ignorance or worse, willful anti Indigenous biases. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves native Calgarians or whatever town you're from, you show me that you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book, Unreconciled, explains this perfectly, as do many Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from climate change created by colonialism, but it would be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, and honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot, south of the imposed US Canadian border, are the Blackfeet, or the Omska Bibigani, and north of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Bagani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Goodstoney, formerly Wesley, the Chiniki and Bearspaw nations of the Stony Nations, or the Iyeth Ha Nakota Wiskta Tabe, and the Dene from Sutina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit, status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands. All non-Indigenous are treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you could go pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, I say thank you. To those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps, so whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe, or you can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. So I wanted to start by acknowledging this American spring that we are seeing. We have a huge amount of students now protesting on campuses across both the US and now Canada. And actually, the American student insurgency is trending in Arabic on Twitter right now. And I always use Twitter's name instead of X because if Elon Musk won't acknowledge his trans child and their new names and pronouns, I am never going to acknowledge X as anything other than Twitter. One of the things that has come out of that I just think is so funny, for those of you who follow me on Twitter, I have retweeted these 5-gallon blue water and jugs and memes that are going out there, as well as some videos. So basically, a lot of these Zionist campuses have thought, oh, we will just turn on the water. That'll get rid of those campers. Boy, did they or underestimate the campers. So they just took those big 5-gallon blue water jugs and just put them right on the sprinkler. And so I thought, brilliant, but that's nothing. And it was really said to me in a way that it is just shocking. When I think about when I was growing up, Columbine happened after I graduated high school. So the idea of a shooter coming into the school was so foreign to me and my generation. It just broke our heart when Columbine happened. And I just assumed after Columbine that America would do better when it came to their gun violence, but absolutely not. Instead, even my own daughter had to learn active shooting drills. And we have a whole generation that are now adults that now know how to make barricades and barricade them safely from active shooters. Why that matters is now we have violent police forces going after these students on campus, and rightfully so. They are barricading themselves into the classrooms as they've been taught. They've been taught the government is not going to help them, not going to save them, and neither will the police. And now it's coming full circle, fruition. This is happening. So, very exciting to listen and see the students doing this work and working hard at trying to be safe, one, but also barricading themselves in and trying to make a stand for Palestine because of the horrible genocide that Israel is unleashing on the Palestinians. Just getting over a cold, so I need to have hot drinks all the time. Um, For a lot of folks who are new to activism, unfortunately, there are certain tactics in the media that I think you should be aware of, and we've seen them both in Occupy and in Idle No More. Um, First and foremost, what the media likes to do is they like to find the most ignorant person and then make it sound like they're the spokesperson. So the most important thing that you do is whoever does take the mic, make sure that they have some sort of media training. So what will happen most likely is that they're going to try to find someone who absolutely does not have media training at all. That's what media does. So if you are a student on campus right now, it is really important that you and your group agree and work really hard at making sure no one takes the mic unless they've already been trained to do so. So, for example, make sure, I'm sure all of your campuses have somebody in poli sci right now. That's who should be your spokesperson, because they're going to get used to drafting talking points. They're going to get used to saying those talking points, and they're going to use that, if not for politicians, for companies. So, really important to utilize those skill sets. If you have journalists in training from your campuses, use them because they have their training as well. And they're working really hard at making sure good narratives get out. Another thing that we should do is, if you do take the mic, make sure you stick to your 2 sentences of talking points, because that's what's going to get published. So, for example, if your message is, we are against the genocide Israel is perpetrating on Palestine, never stray from those words. Never say the H word. Never say the land is referred to as the I word. Always make sure you use your talking points. You write out your 2 sentences and you stick to them. Every single journalist is going to try to make you feel safe and comfortable. Same with police. And what they're going to do is try to pry something out of you. So the last thing you say off the cuff when they ask you, is there anything else you would like to add today? That's the quote they'll most likely use, and especially if you stray from your talking points. So make sure that you keep your talking points simple, you say them repeatedly, and if they try to get you say, "That's an excellent question. What I would like to talk about today is," and you go back to your 2 sentence talking points, because that's all they will print anyway. Another tactic you can use is to put out a press release, and then that way your words cannot be twisted in any way, so that when bad media does come up, because like I seen a Newsweek article that was so horrendously bad, claiming to be from a Palestinian when it wasn't. um, you have your rebuttal already out there, already ready. Get your quotes ready from some of your lead spokespeople in your area, and put out your press releases regularly, so that way nobody can misconstrue what you're having to say. Always play the offense, never the defense, because when the police and when the campus and when the media tried to twist what's happening, you have your press releases to prove that that's not what you are, that's not what you intended at all. Also, really important that um, you have maybe some of those printed off. So that way, when you have media that's there and they don't have the best intentions, you have your talking points if you can't talk to them. Um, and the other point is too is that there will be a lot of bad media, like a rebel media. Here in Calgary, we have Derek Wildebrandt, a former disgraced MLA. He has some kind of stupid newspaper out from Strathmore called The Standard. So all of the conspiracy type of media comes from that type of a group. So, but the truth is, you got to see all media is Zionist propaganda. So making statements to media might not be in your best interest anyway. It just might be best to stick to your pieces of paper, and they will press. They will say, well, it didn't seem like anybody knew what they were talking about, and it wasn't very well organized, and there's no leader. That's their favorite talking point. They said that about Idle No More. They said that about Occupy. There's just no leader. And with the Zionist colonial media, they need a leader, right? Because it's either Joe Biden or nobody. Nobody can possibly speak for anybody but Joe Biden. So it's really important that you know who does speak to the media and maybe put that on your press release. Another thing I wanted to put out there was the alumni. If you are an alumni member of any university, it is your duty at this time to go and support those students, because a lot of these Zionist university campuses, they're funded. That's where their funding comes from. So of course you're going to see presidents put out their, stupid talking points about, you know, twisting what hate is. That's another conversation we should have. A lot of us in DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion, have been seeing how police, these campuses, any leadership in business, everybody who has an agenda of colonialism, misuse hate in order to silence people right now. And we're seeing that in DEI, calling it out regularly. I share so many folks on Twitter as well as through my LinkedIn, people who are saying the right things about what DEI actually is. If you have folks that are talking about anti-Semitism and they're lumping Israel and Zionism in with it, then that's not what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is literal hate against the Jewish population. That is different than a state of Israel going after a whole bunch of people. That it's not the same thing. So I know a lot of people like to think that Canada is only Christian, but it's not, although it is predominantly Christian. But if Canada were to get into a conflict, it wouldn't be seen as, oh, Christianity is under attack. Although the conservatives would make it sound like that, just like they do with Zionism, but whatever, that's another conversation for another day. Yeah, so just some really important things about media. I hope that helps. Policing, obviously, you guys are way ahead of me. I have no idea how to deal with an active shooter drill, as you have all been trained to do your entire freaking life. So hats off to you for knowing to barricade yourselves into these schools and that. I'm in awe as somebody just from the outside watching. I'm in awe of what you're doing. So please, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. We're also seeing frat boys helping the police. So if you ever want to know if you're on the wrong side of any event, if you're helping police, chances are you're on the wrong side. So all you frat boys who are helping the police, shame on you. Shame on you. I also wanted to say that a lot of you may not be aware what an agent provocateur is. It's a cop that pretends to be an activist and then comes into your group to basically cause problems and havoc. So always be careful about agent provocateurs and have a strategy on how to silence them, basically kick them out of whatever you're organizing on, etc. These are really important things. There's a new term that I've been reading about when it comes to Israel, specifically called astroturfing. So I consider myself grassroots. Most of the students are grassroots people, but an astroturf is a little different. An astroturf is like an agent provocateur, a police or a former Israel Defense Force, an IDF member, who purposely infiltrate these types of groups to cause havoc. So what we've seen so far is, pro-Palestinian folks in their tents being surrounded by Israel supporters, and Israel supporters saying really horrid anti-Semitic things. The media is taking those quotes and saying this is what's happening at these pro-Palestinian events, when that's not what's happening at all. But it's really good media, and it helps the Zionist agenda to lie about these things and put it out there. So folks, you got to be careful. If you are reading newspapers or watching global news and believing it, you're probably part of the problem, especially if you're a frat boy helping a cop right now. So my hope is that people will see what's going on and understand what's going on and know that what these students need is support. So if you're not alumni like me, you can still support the movement in the best way you can. So I ask that you do. They'll need it. They'll need it at every post-secondary as we go forward. Um, and see what your role in that can be. Sometimes it's monetary. Sometimes it's helping the lawyers that will help be defending all of these students. And it is a scary time because we all remember, I think it was 1968 in Kent, where they actually did shoot and kill an actual student. So, we have to be careful. Injuries, obviously, a possibility. I watched a really great video coming from an American former bomb specialist. I don't know, but she was talking specifically about tear gas and how it's actually like a powder. So no matter what, like under no circumstances do you touch your skin once you've been around tear gas. And in fact, you'd go away from it as soon as you can and let the wind take all of the powder off of you. When you go to take off your shirt, it will be on your shirt. So don't touch your eyes, as painful and as excruciating as it is. Unfortunately, with all these poor soldiers, they like do this to them, so they get used to what tear gas feels like. She also said that when you sweat, it activates, and you don't want that getting into your eyes. If you do, to keep your eyes closed, and then slowly open, slowly open, just to let the air come in, the oxygen, take out the particles. So, and of course, when you get home, to wash, 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 wash. She said, and I thought this was really important, like someone like me with long hair, to flip your hair and rinse it and rinse it and rinse it before you ever consider getting in the shower and putting, like, shampoo and letting something run in your eyes. So really important tips that we're hearing from the front lines already. A lot of folks reminding you, if you have like tattoos, you might want to cover them up for these types of actions, and just try to be as safe as you can. Still having COVID, like, just got a stupid cough and I can't get rid of it because I've had COVID so many goddamn times. So, again, be safe, be as careful as you can. Um, one other thing I wanted to bring up, only because all you North Americans, you're on stolen land. And a lot of you have not been taught about Indigenous people. If you're listening to me now, thank you for finally putting some effort towards learning about us. But at the end of the day, if you're calling the police over on a homeless Indigenous person, you have to remember that you're occupying stolen land. You are, to me, what Israel is to Palestinians. You are the occupier, you are the colonizer, and you are taking that space away from the rightful people of those lands. So if your activism doesn't include Indigenous people, you're really not understanding DEI and colonialism very well, even though you understand it fine when it comes to Palestine and Israel. But when you're here on Turtle Island in the US and Canada, you are in stolen Indigenous lands. And you have to understand that every single policy that you have ever seen here, or on Palestinians, has been done here first. I've done at least 3 podcasts since the start of October 7th on what is happening in Palestine. So there's at least 3 other podcasts you could listen to hear, some of the things that they've done to us as Indigenous people here in the US and Canada, that they are doing or have done or will do in Palestine and Israel if we don't stop this. So I hope that helps some folks. If I'd love to hear from you if it does or if it doesn't. Um, I want to talk a little bit totally off the topic now and moving on from Palestine. I wanted to talk a little bit about the amount of forest fires that are happening here in Alberta. We're already in full forest fire season. I'm like, right now, I can still breathe the air, thank God, but I know it's coming where we will be unable to do that from here on in. We also got new approvals to do a bunch of clear cutting down south. So there's a few groups that are pearl clutching and are sad panties that this is happening, even though in December I was sharing that information, and somehow I guess the thoughts of candy canes and Christmas meant more, right? So anyway, that's happening here in Alberta. Not much we can do about that. Obviously I'm in Calgary, Alberta. We have this incredible marathon of city councilors listening to Calgarians, basically NIMBY boomers, saying, "Oh my God, we can't do rezoning because my property value matters." And I just think it's really funny. And the Reconciliation Action Group, we have some really great members. And one specifically said, the entitlement coming from these white supremacist colonizers talking about the land and their ownership to it and their privilege to basically exclude anyone that they want to has been really eye-opening and shocking to them. So again, if you're not doing reconciliation work, you're probably like not aware of that. So I really thought it was a nod to her, a hats off to her for recognizing the gravity of that. Um, I had another friend, and he used the term advice when I was telling them some things, and I'm like, dude, there are less than 1 million of us here as status natives. And when I open my mouth and you think all I do is give advice, I'm sorry, but you're missing a chance to listen to Indigenous culture. So my hope is that people will start to listen to Indigenous voices, join reconciliation committees or groups, or start them if they're not already going on, because like you are missing a huge part of life when you have an Indigenous lens to help guide you. So I really do hope folks look into that. Um, a lot of news happening across Canada because of the Trans Mountain Pipeline about to open, being fully operational. Yes, I totally feel like that's like, the Death Star becoming fully operational. It is Comic Con this weekend here in Calgary. So I got Star Wars 24/7 on my brain, even though Avatar is kind of the big thing in our family right now. But yeah, it was really refreshing. We had this elder, Haida elder, come to Calgary because they were doing a court case against a Catholic priest who had the audacity to do a bunch of Indian residential school denialism. And her name is Safina. So the Reconciliation Action Group came out and supported her as she did that. And it was interesting because some of the folks that I got to meet there, really stole my heart in such a good way. And we were talking about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and I was telling them what it was like to do the two protests in front of Trans Canada. And the second time, especially when you had two rows of cops and all of these horrible oil and gas people screaming racism, uh, all sorts of horrible things to me the entire time, and then having the flip side, my new friend that I had just met, that had come, she was in with Wet'suwet'en when the RCMP came in the second time. So she got to witness all of that crapola. And one of the things that actually just broke my heart in such a good way, it made me cry while we were there, was hearing this initiative that the Haida are doing. I just was too stunned to speak. So I cried. What happened, what they're telling me they're doing, I was saying, my husband and I used to dive out of Porpoise Bay, on the, HMCS Chaudier, and, she looked at me and said, "I think we are meant to cross paths then." And I'm like, "Why?" And they said to me that, what the Haida Nation is going to do is take all of these orcas that are in captivity in these horrible places, and they're going to name them. They're going to have ceremony, they're going to name them and have them be a part of the Haida Nation. And then they're going to escort them back home, and keep them in some sort of rehabilitation in Porpoise Bay. And I just it just felt so right. it just made me cry. So it was really, it was my honor to meet Safina, this Haida elder, and her crew that came here to Calgary to, like, I thought it was good enough to be going after the Catholic Church and their Indian residential school denialism, but that they just are taking it to a whole new level, fighting the Trans Mountain pipeline and doing the good work of rehabilitating these orcas that have been taken. So really honored to get to know them. I beg of you all to follow Safina, this Haida elder. I did share about it on all my social media, but I can tell my algorithms are really down. So some digital training for folks. If you're not amplifying Indigenous voices, then unfortunately you're making our algorithms go down and down and down. And that's what's happening right now in my world. And it's because I'm pro Gaza as opposed to, pro Israel. If I was pro Israel, then my algorithms would be much higher. And because I'm an Indigenous woman, my algorithms are always far down. So, whether it's another Indigenous content creator or myself, I just beg of you to start retweeting us. And if you have noticed that, oh, I follow Christy Belcourt or some of these really great Indigenous leaders, and I'm not seeing their posts, it's time to go check in and like some of their things and retweet them and give them 5 or 9 words in order to start bumping that up into your feed again. Because if you're not actively working against the algorithms that are meant to suppress voices like mine, then you're not helping. Same with our Black leaders, same with our Palestinian leaders. We have to actively work hard at keeping their voices amplified. So I beg of you to do that. If you're a true ally, I know I recently lost a friend of 10 years because I called her out on an issue, not even in a mean way. I meant to call her in, but she just lost it. And, this is actually like the fourth or fifth person who has done that within our group. So we're trying to figure out protocols of accountability for non-Indigenous who think they're allies but are really horrible at it, to figure out how to work with them better. Because, like, some won't read the material, some say horrible things that are really painful, and then others just up and leave like that. So my hope is over time we can create some kind of protocol so that people see they are held accountable for their behavior. Hmm. Another thing that happened to me that I was quite surprised by. First, I'll tell you, Dr. Jane Philpont was one of our original Liberal MPs that got elected in 2015. I'm sure many of you have followed her work that she had done in Indian Affairs as well as the health ministry. And I just, I had immense respect for her because she was the first person to take all of the 700 nations and figure out where we were on the water issue. Did we need infrastructure? Were we drinking dirty water? When was, all of it? She put it on a spreadsheet. It was her. And so that made me really happy. And she has a really sad story of losing a child. She and her husband were doing work in Africa, and her child got this. I can't remember if it's a bacteria or if it's a virus, and it's deadly there and easily treatable if you have proper access to health. So I always had immense respect because she understood what it was like to have oppression and to have lack of health care. And the work she did with creating legalization of cannabis, like there was a lot of great work that I thought she did that I thought deserved far more accolades than people gave her at the time. And then she supported Jody Wilson Rainbow through her entire voyage of racism and sexism that she experienced within the party. And then I met her, and we have a book fair that happens out here in Calgary called Word Fest. It's wonderful. kind of get to meet people you would normally never get to meet. So one year, Mike Myers came out, and my husband went and met him. And for folks who don't know, he's part of Wayne's World and ST or SNL. And we wrote a book, and so I bought my husband a ticket. He got the book. He went and met him, and it's wonderful. And over the years, I've got to see many authors that I love. Run a book club, etc. So when Jane came, I bought a ticket and bought her book. And, I at the end they always ask a question. So I just assumed I was giving her low hanging like a slow ball here so that she could hit it out the ballpark. But no, I have been very much disillusioned and changed my mind of her that night. And I'll tell you more in a minute. But anyway, for folks who don't know, in Canada, every Indigenous person has the right to health under treaty. And most Canadians don't know that because they don't even care about treaty, let alone our right to health. So I had assumed, asking the question about, the treaty right to health, that it would be in her book. And so I asked that question, and she outright said, "Nope, no, it's not my book." She talked about how great our spirituality was, though, in us healing, which felt very much like a form of appropriation. So I haven't read her book yet, and I don't. I hope I'm wrong, but if she having the portfolio of Indigenous affairs and then health is not like the staunchest advocate for our treaty right to health, like that just shows it doesn't matter how educated you are. We need Indigenous people advocating for Indigenous rights in every sector. So strongly disappointed with her from that interaction. But then I go find out, yeah, huge thing to leave out in the books as a TikToker. Thank you for joining me, by the way. So I'm busy, uh, you know, feeling all hurt and sad panties because Jane Philpont isn't a big, part of this right for treaty health. And then my favorite Chinese doctor who's in Canada here out east, you would know him from the University of Ottawa and the incredible work that he's been doing out there. Um, you know, he said that under her new role as, I want to say, Queen's University, yeah, she's been very much anti-Palestinian, pro-Israel, and he publicly shamed her, and I retweeted her and blocked her. We literally were following each other, but I just can't. I can't allow somebody like that to not get it. Like I gave her a good week since I seen her to retweet and do something about treaty right to health. And since she chose not to, I was just like, I got to block her. I don't want her following me. So I didn't even do the soft block. I did the hard block. And I can't read her stuff, and I'm not ever going to promote her stuff because she's basically anti-Indigenous and she doesn't even know it. I know she probably thinks she's a good ally, but I don't see that at all. So I'm really strongly disappointed with that and kind of sad panties about it if you bring it up to me. So another thing I wanted to bring up, I have nothing but the deepest respect for Cindy Blackstock and the organization she created, the First Nations Child and Family Caring Society. She's the one who's taken Stephen Harper and Justin Trudeau's governments to court over the disproportionate amount of money that goes to Indigenous children compared to non-Indigenous children. So anyway, she reminds us that today, out of all days, is in 2011, young people came together to celebrate Shannens Dream Day of Action to serve as a reminder to continue to hold the federal government accountable to honor their promise for safe and comfy schools for all First Nation children and youth. So for folks who haven't heard of that, please Google Shannens Dream. I had to cry before we started this because I remember when that happened. She was part of Attawapiskat, and that was at the same time of Idle No More and the chief trying to bring awareness to a lot of these issues. And and Shannon died. Shannon died before she got to see the new school being put in. And I know a lot of Indigenous kids still don't have good schools, that don't have proper funding, and they're certainly not comfortable. And my daughter is in, you know, a Calgary public school, and does have those luxuries. I had those luxuries, and it's not fair. It's disproportionate. It's painful to know how many of our kids are already have so many more barriers than non-Indigenous kids. And the fact that Canadians still are not helping us and not advocating for that and not doing better on that, it's a painful reminder of what so-called allyship actually isn't. um, on a positive note, though, I will say I am so appreciative of those from the Reconciliation Action Group actually doing the work. Um, Many of them have done these incredible social media graphics. One of the things I'm quite proud of is us doing all of these graphics up towards what's called the SOR. So it's the school resource officer. I can't believe anybody thinks a cop should be in a school, but here we are. And you've heard me say in previous podcasts that cops should not be in schools. And there are police free schools organizations. And if you've followed my book club and followed my podcast, you know we've done books on this. So it's critical that we get Canadians on board understanding the gravity of this. And now I'm sad to say that it took all of these Palestinians' death and now students on campuses protesting, keeping cops out of these universities. That's what it took for folks to understand why police shouldn't be in schools. Anyway, the SOR work that we did here took quotes from a lot of the youth who were Black and Indigenous and talked about how horrible the police were to them in the schools. And these, both the Calgary Board of Education as well as the Catholic school districts, they claim that they're, you know, safe and inclusive and caring, but you literally have all of these students saying, guess what, you're not. And they don't care, because at the end of the day they just go for the white kids, right? So for folks who are in Calgary, I don't know why you're not writing your MLAs, your city councilors, the police commission, but I know you're not. And I know you're not doing the work of reconciliation. So, you know, I hats off to those who actually are doing the work, who are showing up to our meetings, who are, you know, doing the retweets, doing the work of reconciliation, um, trying to amplify Indigenous voices, because that's what really matters. And not just mine. Like, I mean, there are so many wonderful leaders out there that voices should be amplified. So speaking of which, probably should bring up what happened to my friend a couple of days ago with Air Canada. Uh, for folks who don't know, the national chief is Cindy Woodhouse Nipinak. And I did a on TikTok a podcast or a TikTok about it and shared that on all my social medias to give people a heads up. And basically, she had shared on her Facebook that Air Canada didn't want to help her with her headdress and keep it stowed. Like, so you have a whole plane full of people and they picked on an Indigenous woman and her headdress as the one thing that has to go into luggage, rather than all the other non-Indigenous passengers who probably could have gave up a bag or, like, you know, sleep apnea machine or whatever for it to go into luggage. But nope, they picked on the Native woman. Not surprised, but this is now the national chief. And the fact that they felt comfortable doing it after the work Sean Leo has tried to do with Air Canada, like it just shows how this anti-racism stuff isn't working very well in these businesses, one, and two, reconciliation is not happening. there is a whole call to action for businesses and reconciliation, and they obviously are not listening at all. So disappointing to say the least. Now, Cindy is gracious enough that she's going to meet up with some of these folks from Air Canada, but I honestly don't even. I'm so tired of non-Indigenous not doing better sooner. Here we are. So, um, another fun thing that's happening here in Alberta is something called Bill 20. And oh man, you are getting all the municipal colonial politicians all up in a tizzy because of it. So in this one, what the UCP government and Daniel Smith want to do is fire any counselor they figure they need to fire. And for those who don't know, in Edmonton, there's a counselor named Michael Jans, and he's like, at the risk of being fired as an Edmonton counselor, I think it's important to call out the UCP and Premier Smith for not paying her property taxes and owing Edmonton millions of dollars. And I just think it's so funny to see all these progressives lose their nut over, the government having the choice to just fire them, as if that's not what Canada's been doing to Indigenous people since contact. But here we are. I get a kick out of these things anyway. So a shout out to so many people in my life. Reconciliation Action Group. I've had a friend staying on our couch for a month, and they've tried to put together a bit of a fundraiser so that we could donate a little bit of money to him, get him that place. He did secure a place, so the hope was to help him out there. So I really appreciate that mutual aid. I did share it. I don't know if folks here in the different mediums got to see it, but at the end of the day, if you want to do a transfer, you can do it to the Reconciliation Action Group or myself, and then that way it will get to the person it's intended to get to. So just wanted to say thank you to the Reconciliation Action Group for all of the work they actually do compared to, like, I mean, I'm in a city of over 1 million people, and we have a small group of like committed folks that are doing work on anti-racism and Indigenous education, and I'm really grateful for them. And anyway, if you are a person who is interested, I also have a book club. It is just a Zoom link, so it's open to anyone who wants to join. You are welcome to join us. And I always put out the book club list, and I always tell people what's next. Full moon ceremony. It was an interesting day. It was a beautiful day. And then for the actual ceremony that I usually do from 6 to 8, the wind really picked up. So I had to keep a really small fire. And because I'm in an urban setting and I have a hose, it's a little safer, but it is so close to fire season right now. Well, it is. And had another friend from BC actually share more of the nations that are doing fire burning since it was outlawed in the 1800s. Thanks, Canada. Mm. Anyway, really grateful for the Reconciliation Action Group's work. I'm proud that this podcast has given solutions in cultural safety training, cultural first aid, and all of them to create a safer space for Indigenous people, people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ. According to the 2023 Quality of Life Report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of their religion, ethnicity, skin color, culture, language, accent, gender, or sexual orientation, which is up from 75% in 2023. And I will imagine next year it'll be a lot higher than 88%. So I wish Calgary would do better. 84% of racialized Calgarians believe that racism exists versus only 66% of non-racialized Calgarians. I'm just going to throw this out there again, a little more digital training. If you don't recognize what a troll is online, you're literally contributing to a lot of these paid trolls. So every time you interact with a paid troll, they get paid. So the less you do that, the better. Anyway, So for 66% of non-racialized Calgarians, I mean, it feels like 100 with the amount of paid trolls there are on Twitter alone. I want to say thank you to Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Friedkin of heretohelp.bc.ca. They have a great section on what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it. So their work and those cultural action tools are available. Please support Indigenous work like that as part of your reconciliation work and settler understandings. I'm just lucky enough to highlight and repeat them here. Internalized racism and lateral violence is another form of violence Indigenous and marginalized people experience by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. RacialEquityTools.org has a ton of resource files and a great section on what is internalized racism by Donna Bevans. And so you can go throw her some money too, if you'd like. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee. So that's afsc.org. If you see or experience racism, you can also report it at acttoendracism.ca, but it is more Asian related racism, to be fair, though, and that's at 587-507-3838. They just recently put out a great report about Asian hate racism that they've experienced since COVID. So highly recommend them if you're more from that. The Chinese Community Association, I think, is the one who really spearheaded that. Teresa Wupa, for folks who are from Calgary or from Alberta, they would recognize that name as one of our former MLAs. So that kind of Asian, not South Asian. Just want to clarify. For anyone who follows me on my social medias, I strongly recommend watching anti-racism organizational lead for the city of Calgary giving a presentation on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader. So you can go on YouTube and see that. So if you just Google journey of becoming an anti-racism leader, city of Calgary, you will find this link. I have shared it. I know not everybody has had an opportunity to watch it, but I wish they would. Calgary Black Lives Matter activists Taylor McNally and Adora Nolfor have been legally targeted, and Stop the Stack YYC has been really great at highlighting some of the issues, doing education on what stacking charges is. And they are the ones who are, if you have money to donate, please don't hesitate to give it to them. They absolutely need it too. Indigenous have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties, listen to politicians in their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the marginalized in their budget with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs and services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lack of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote to that party directly negatively impacts marginalized people or more equity seeking people. Demand they implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. And frankly, you can do this with your businesses and your sports clubs and your world too. The recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports about child welfare reform, violence preventions, and now 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit. Provincially in Alberta, the Kenney government created 113 pathways to justice. So all you blue voters should be holding your blue MLAs to account on it. Follow the new Premier's Council on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls work. Guess what? They haven't done any. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report. Denying these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in the educational and health institutions with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand change from election platforms and politicians. If they don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, and sexism, they literally have zero business running. This should be understood by all parties, local politicians, community organizations, sports clubs. Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians become allies, because guess what? There's tons out there. Also, the Calgary Foundation has a great allied toolkit. So, maybe that's a good place for you to start if you're a really shitty ally. Jesus. Stephanie Harp and I had an emergency podcast like a year and a half ago in the hopes that we would write our allies to write out and do more on the homelessness crisis that we're facing. We really recommend that you sign up at aboriginalalert.ca. You can also go to Missing Children Society of Canada. You can download their app. The Women's Homelessness.ca put out this fantastic statement about demanding urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, Two Spirit, and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness. But I didn't see your letters, so you didn't CC me. The province published more data about the drug crisis that we're facing, and it's just, oh, I don't know what to tell you. Recovery is not the way. If you know somebody who's using substances, please don't use a loan. If you are using a loan, you can contact the National Overdose Response Service at 1-888-688-NORS for support. You can download the Brave or Doors or Lifeguard apps. I strongly support Freedom's Path Recovery Society.ca. You can donate to them. They provide free one-on-one addictions counseling services. Group treatment and recovery for Calgary are queer-friendly and anti-racist. As many of you have heard, I am fully supporting Canada's first 2S LGBTQ addiction recovery center, stonewallrecovery.ca. So you can also give your money to those guys. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything I talked about today and need to talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855 242 3310. It's toll free, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can also text at hopeforwellness.ca. If more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two Spirit, for immediate emotional assistance, you can call 844-413-6649. It is a national toll-free 24/7 crisis call line supporting women. It's a tough one to talk about. 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta is ssisa.ca. I already talked about the Caring Society and Shannens Dream. I hope you look that up. Indian Residential School Survivor and Family Hotline is 866-925-4419. The Native Youth Crisis Hotline is 877-209-1266. For non-Indigenous, there are crisis center lines in your area, usually a functioning 211, the new national number of 988, or you can call 833-456-4566 or text 45645. And you can go to crisisservicescanada.ca for more. The Kids Help Phone was 1-800-668-6868. I don't know if it's still now under the umbrella of 988 as well. So the following are 2S LGBTQ crisis support lines that are available in most areas across Canada. So you can, you know what? I'm just going to go back to 988 because I actually have a friend who is a Black queer man who's worked really hard on conversion therapy, say some things that were really hurtful for him for a lot of the resources that I used to give for 2S LGBTQ. So I am going to find some new ones that aren't under that umbrella and encourage people to call 988 for now. And I'll update my podcast for next time. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back. That's why I started this podcast, to speak freely without interruption, without tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear an Indigenous woman speak, but they sure like to tell us about all their ignorance. People who know nothing about us, colonialism, the constant surveillance of our people, our protest, our vigil, and our rights. I and many others share info on microaggressions daily, so it's just unacceptable anymore. Learn about being trauma informed. People like me are dealing with internalized racism, gatekeepers, folks that survive off the status quo, folks who are in their trauma, and stop people from doing the work and deplete personal resources. External and internal racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous peoples, folks with disabilities, QT, BIPOC, and more. I want to say Masicho to my ancestors, to my granny and my mom of what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be blunt and strong. My stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and roots and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian. It is through her. I am a second generation proud Calgarian. I want to say thank you to Darcy for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, he has supported me in my journey of the Red Road. And he has witnessed decades of racism and sexism. And I'm just going to point it out again. If you missed my last few podcasts, I actually had somebody who wants to be an ally, but doesn't really understand. He thinks that my husband runs the whole show. And it's really sad that a white person would disrespect and assume that I am not capable of doing that. I was so disappointed. So it is really harmful what people think sometimes. Just because I say thank you to my husband doesn't mean I am not, the co-producer and do the writer, the host. It is shocking to me how if I don't thank myself, you just assume my husband does it all. Like if that's not a level of misogyny and racism, I don't know what is. So to our child, we are blessed to learn from you daily, and we are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. I hope that my daughter, sorry for that interruption. I just had this TikTok problem come up where they have to prove you're still on. That was disappointing because that just interrupted everything. So I was thanking my daughter. I was thanking my child, and I was hoping that they will be proud of me in the future to discuss these present day issues in a way that they'll understand. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. I also want to honor the Blackfoot, as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. Again, thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. I also have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to Native Calgarian for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And the last thing I want to do is like a second last thing is a touch grass moment. There are a lot of dark things that I talk about and that we see on social media. So touching grass is an expression to kind of reconnect to the world and not focus too much on the ugly. And I'd love to hear yours, but I will tell you, for me, 100%. For folks who don't know, Wob Canoe had the audacity to change tire. And the thing about natives and our fun sense of humor was that somebody took that image and immediately stitched it and memed it with a million other things. So if you were an organization that fed youth lunch programs, you took it and you put it in part of your table of feeding people and being like, thank God Premier Wob Canoe came here to help feed our youth. And then it just went off. Like I seen a Star Wars meme. I seen it with everything. Somebody even beaded this medallion. So I was sharing it probably for 4 days straight, at least on all my social media, because it was the funniest thing on the planet for me to watch. So I hope you all enjoyed, who follow me on my social media, all of the Wob Canoe memes that I shared as faithfully as I could. And if you've seen it out there from other content creators, that's the story behind it. It just made me laugh so, so hard. And I hope it made you laugh too. So thank you so much for listening. And I want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not Tradish. And my beautiful cousin responded, or you'd be in my dish. So thanks folks for listening.